Welcome everyone. This is part 4 of our ongoing study of students and how the pandemic is affecting them. My name is Elizabeth Johnson. I'm chairman at SimpsonScarborough. I'm really happy to have you here today. We have a few other folks from our team on the line. As you can see, Jason Simon, our CEO, is joining us from the Bay Area. Meredith Simpson is here. She leads our amazing research team and has played a key role in conceiving and implementing our COVID studies over the last year. Malachi Koop is here, of course. He's the project lead for this work, has done an incredible job of finding the story in the data that we're going to share with you today. So thank you all for your great thinking and your hard work on this project. We actually had over 700 people sign up for this event today. So we actually are not going to do a live Q&A. That would be pretty difficult to manage. But we do want to invite you to post questions in the chat. And our team is going to do the best job if they can of answering all of them. Do not feel like you have to take notes during this presentation. Immediately following this session, we're going to send you a copy of the full report of this study. So you'll have that. It has a lot more data than we're actually going to cover today. We will also send you a link to the recording of this session in case you want to pass it along to others on your campus. We encourage you to do that. So when the COVID hit, we knew we had to get out and study college-bound students and current college students. It was sort of obvious from the beginning that the pandemic was going to wreak havoc on these kids, and lo and behold, it has. It's wreaked havoc on all of us. And I'm actually sure things would have been a lot worse for college kids if not for the tireless efforts of probably most of you attending today who work on college campuses. I actually want to start out our session today by thanking you for that. We know that most of your budgets have been crushed, that many of your institutions have been forced to lay off members of your team, which is so incredibly painful. And all of this is happening while you're asked to do more. And to respond to this crisis. So it's been really an interesting year. Colleges and universities across our country have shown unbelievable flexibility and resilience over the last year. It's really shocking, honestly. And I know I speak for everyone at SimpsonScarborough when I say that we are extremely proud to consider ourselves part of the higher education community. And like you, we're all ready to get past this and put everything we've learned to work and move on. Maybe not to the way things were, but to a new normal. So real quick, just to introduce SimpsonScarborough, most of you I think probably know about us, but just to orient everyone, we were founded in 2006. We're a woman-owned firm dedicated to supporting marketing and communication efforts at colleges and universities. We're a full-service marketing agency. Our work almost always starts with research and strategy, and then leads to creative, web, digital, marketing planning, even media buying and placement. So we help colleges and universities manage and advance their reputation, enroll students, raise money, and we do all of that because we think that higher education is an essential service that's going to actually help us solve the world's most pressing problems. We work with lots of different kinds of clients. We have a few featured on the screen here that are probably very recognizable names, but we really appreciate all the work that we are able to do with more than 300 colleges and universities since we were founded. So real quickly before we dive into our data, I want to let you know about something coming up this summer. Many of you probably know that we have conducted a survey of higher ed CMOs or equivalents several years running now. We typically present the results in AMA in November. And we call it a CMO study, but you don't have to have that title to participate. If you are the lead marketer on your campus, whatever your title, we want you to participate in this study. We really believe that it serves as a very important resource for higher education marketers. We gather data on budgets, staffing, priorities, goals, tactics, and it is the largest longitudinal study of higher ed marketers out there. So it gives you really strong and important comparative data about our industry. So we are going to be collecting the data for our CMO study this summer. Be on the lookout for an invite to participate, and please participate and ensure that your industry colleagues do the same. The bigger the sample size, the better, the higher quality data that we will able to bring back to you. So we've made some important changes this year in particular, both to how we collect our data and how it will be presented. It's definitely going to be something that you want to be a part of. So look for that this summer, and please take that survey. Okay, so we actually conducted our first wave of this study way back in March. Right after the lockdown. We did the second round of data collection in April, just about a month later. The third was in July. And then for this fourth wave of the study, we collected our data just last month, mid-February. We surveyed almost 700 high school seniors nationwide. Our previous studies actually included, if you may recall, it included high school juniors and also current college students. But for this particular report, we're just focusing exclusively on college-bound high school seniors who will be enrolling at your institutions this fall. They equally represent different regions of the country. They're all planning to attend four-year residential colleges and universities this coming fall. So that's the sampling frame. I do want to really quickly call out our partner, Innovate MR. They are our sample partner. That's how we reach our potential respondents. They've worked with us on all 4 studies that we've conducted in the last year, and we are very, very grateful for their partnership. Okay, so in our first study, I'm going to take you back. In our first study conducted last March, we actually found that 1 in 5 high school seniors that were planning to attend college before the pandemic hit said they weren't going anymore. 1 in 5. 1 in 4 told us that their college choice was in some way being affected by the COVID. We conducted our second wave of the study just a month later in April, as I mentioned, and that data told us that if colleges were only able to offer remote instruction in the fall, that overall enrollment could decline as much as 20%. You may remember that was a very startling finding. Thank goodness that didn't happen. Many schools opened for in-person or hybrid instruction, and many allowed students to come back to campus, so we didn't see those declines. Our third study, conducted in July, was titled The Fragility of Trust. And if you read that report, you'll remember that we talked a lot about how students didn't really trust their institutions to keep them safe. Even more, they didn't trust their fellow students to follow COVID guidelines. But one of the other really important things we learned from wave 3 was that students wanted even more communication about COVID. As much as you were communicating, which was, voluminous, they really wanted more. And we actually found that perceptions of your institutions were very strongly correlated with effective communicating, which is probably not surprising to all us marketers and communicators out there, but really was an important finding to help people understand the importance of the communications function on our campuses. So the fourth wave of our study, we've titled The Other COVID-19 Long Haulers, and that's a reference to what you're seeing here. High school students are in crisis and they need support. We don't want to minimize the long haulers who are actually experiencing the physical effects, long-term effects of COVID, but the first key theme that really emerged from this study is that high school seniors are in crisis and they need support. Maybe if you've seen the Today Show, they're running a segment called Kids Under Pressure. And but they focus mostly on school-age kids, these cute little kids that they show in the classroom. But high school and college students are experiencing the same difficulties. And this quote on the right just kills me. It says, "To be honest, ever since quarantine, I've felt lifeless." And we're not putting this on here as like a one-off quote that we heard once. We had lots of kids saying things like this in the responses to our open-ended questions. We're going to share more of those in a minute. There are a few kids that are sort of, glass half full students, saying, yeah, COVID's made it easier for me to find the college that I want to attend. But those are actually isolated opinions. In general, students' comments are riddled with words like stressful, worried, difficult, depression, worse, harder, and sad. So these really are the other long haulers. They are trying to make the first big decision in their lives and everything is off. right? They don't have access to the resources that students older to them had, or resources that students younger than them will have. So if you've been to one of our previous webinars, then you are prepared for the deluge of data that we are about to pile on you. If not, I hope you ate your Wheaties. I actually have only 25 slides to share, and we're on 7. So that gives you a sense of sort of, how long this is going to take. I think we will finish in under an hour. But let's dive in and go ahead and look at some of the findings. So what we found is that almost 2/3 of kids say that they're less motivated in school, specifically as a result of COVID. Fully 2/3 say they're less engaged. Over half, 57%, say that their educational experience is worse than it was pre-COVID, and 29% say their grades are worse. You may have seen reports on this earlier this month that kids all over the country are failing courses, in high school courses at rates far higher than normal. Malachi is actually going to post a link to that article in the chat if you missed it. But all of this is happening in an environment where 59% of kids are taking classes online. 27%, as you can see on the right, are taking classes in a hybrid model, and 14% are taking classes in person only. So, none of this is surprising necessarily when you consider that way back in April, high school told us that remote learning was awful. The second wave of our study actually found that 70% of kids said that online remote learning was worse than in-person instruction. In that previous study, we actually found lots of differences by race and ethnicity. Students of color were far more likely to be negatively impacted by COVID. They were a lot more likely to say they weren't going to go to college at all because of COVID. They were more likely to say their top choice had changed because of COVID. So that's actually why the data here are surprising. There are no differences in this data by race, no differences in who's feeling less motivated, less engaged, getting worse grades, no variations by race or ethnicity. So the bottom line is that all students are struggling. So if you were thinking based on the previous slide that kids who were taking in-person courses were sort of doing fine, and only the ones taking hybrid or remote courses were suffering, well, you're wrong. That's what I expected the findings to say. And actually, it doesn't really matter how students are taking classes. The majority of students are saying that they're less motivated, less engaged, and their educational experience is worse. I mean, look right here. My educational experience is worse is 56% saying that. If they're all in person, it only goes up to 60 if they're all online. 55 over here, 66 over here, 59 to 69. So, still even, over half of the kids who are taking classes in person are less motivated and less engaged. There are only small differences in this data by the method of instruction. So, a simple question. We asked high school seniors to rate their anxiety about how COVID is affecting their ability to begin their college education in person in the fall. And half of students rated their anxiety a 7 or higher on a 10-point scale. 3/4 rated their anxiety a 5 or higher on a 10-point scale. This little chart here is called a histogram. And if you turn it on its side, you've probably, if you studied statistics, you remember the normal curve, right? Where, most students are in the middle and then it tails off sort of evenly on the high side and the low side. This is not the normal curve. If we turn it on its side, it is very clearly skewed to the high end and really captures in numbers the stress and anxiety that these students are feeling. So 44% of college-bound seniors said their family's financial situation has been affected by COVID. 23% say a parent has been laid off or furloughed because of COVID. And 42% say someone in their immediate family has actually contracted the virus. So put all this together and you have 68% of college-bound high school seniors saying that at least one of these things are true. So 7 out of 10, essentially, students have been directly impacted by the pandemic in one way or the other. It's funny. So, all of us, we do a ton of qualitative research, but if we're all being honest, we're a bunch of quant nerds. Meredith, raise your hand. We love numbers, we love data, we use numbers to tell stories. But as soon as we pulled this data out of the field, Meredith messaged me in Teams. She was completely overwhelmed by the open-ended responses of these students shared. She was on the verge of tears. Not that it's hard to make her cry, but it was because of comments like these. You know, I feel more in the dark about colleges and just isolated. I'm more scared now. It's definitely hurt my mental health and made school so much harder. Here are a few more direct quotes. My mental health has taken a dive bomb. It's been very hard to even get motivated. It has made my depression worse. I've started to hate school. I'm really scared for my future. And then just, I'm sad. So, you know, this is what really sort of, you know, was the most upsetting about these findings, to really understand the mental health challenges it's creating for these students. You know, they've missed out on things like campus tours. Here's another 2 quotes. The first one is, it's quite difficult to feel the vibes of colleges without being able to check them out in person. And the second one, not being able to visit campuses really sucks. Schools I've always been interested in were crossed off my list because I never got the chance to visit. So this is one of the big stories we want to help all of you understand. They may not show it on the outside, but these kids are really struggling on the inside. I mean, we've all been struggling living through the past year, but these students, you know, they're sort of no longer children, but they're not yet adults. We don't know yet what the long-term ramifications of all this, you know, is for them yet, and especially the impact that it will have on their, you know, the impact it is having on their college search and will have on their college experience. You know, most college presidents actually already are aware of this and are worried about it. There was an article in Inside Higher Ed on Monday about a recent study of presidents. Malachi's going to put a link in the chat to that study if you missed it. But mental health of their students was at the top of the list of current concerns of college presidents. 64% said they were very concerned about the mental health of their students, 31% saying somewhat concerned. So this is we know this is an issue. It's just one that we can't lose sight of, and we'll chat about that more when we get to the end. Okay, key theme number 2 of 3 is that students are behind in the college search process. This was also reported in the higher ed media a couple weeks ago, that colleges are moving application deadlines again this year because apps are rolling in so late. So let me show you what we found. So in mid-February, 22% of the high school seniors, college bound, that we surveyed, knew where they were going to go to school. 37% had already applied or were in the midst of filling out their applications, but 4 out of 10 hadn't applied anywhere, hadn't even decided where they wanted to apply. So, you know, unfortunately, we don't have any pre-COVID data to compare this to, but clearly it reinforces what we've been reading about in the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed. Kids are late in the process, and we need to think about making accommodations for that. We need to review our comms plans with prospects and make sure that they line up with where kids actually are in the process, because this year is very, very different. Now, you know, we've been shouting from the mountaintops ever since our very first wave of this project that we've been finding many, many differences in how COVID is affecting students by race and ethnicity. And this is another place where there are some really big differences. Here are a couple examples. 18% of white students are in the 2 earliest stages of this process, 18%. Right, so meaning that they haven't thought about the college search, or they just have, you know, they've only started researching schools. That figure is 38% for Black students. So 18% of white kids are in the early part of the process. 38% of Black students are still in the earliest phases of the process. Also, 31% of white students, but only 12% of Black students had decided where they wanted to go to college when we collected this data. So, you know, if we actually categorize these, each of these options here as sort of early, mid, and late funnel, we actually see that 70% of Caucasian students and 75% of Asian students are late funnel. So they are further down in the process of selecting a college. Just 39% of Black students and 49% of Hispanic students are in the late funnel stages. So there are clearly some indications that there are some big differences in how students are moving through the college selection funnel based on race and ethnicity. Okay, so here's a little bit of good news. 3/4 of kids actually do say that, they feel prepared to make their college choice, which is great. It's only, just a little bit less than a quarter that say they do not feel prepared. And not surprisingly, those kids who don't feel prepared, they're just having a hard time assessing fit, right? I mean, probably most of us on this call have been in higher ed for a long time, and higher ed marketers and admissions enrollment management folks, we always struggle with that concept of fit, right? Because when you ask a student why they chose a particular school, they'll say things like, oh, I walked onto campus and I just knew that's where I was going to go to school, right? And you ask them why, explain to me what gave you that feeling, and they'll say, well, I don't know, it's just a feeling, I can't really put my finger on it, right? So this has always been our challenge, and now it's our challenge more than ever, right? Colleges have to understand their own culture and be able to articulate that through their marketing. That's what really strong branding is all about. What is the experience at your institution like, and how can you convey it through your marketing? And now, how can you convey it remotely through your marketing? We really need to continue to think about how we can help students determine fit. And we need to do that whether or not they can ever come to our campus, right? Because, when the pandemic is over, some kids will come flooding back to our campuses, but some won't. Many will not be able. Many were never able, and we know that was creating access problems. So, one of the big lessons that we can learn from this experience with the COVID is that, we need to figure out how to communicate our brand to students who can and cannot visit our campus. And then so both of those have to be really strong. We've talked with a couple clients over the last couple days about what they have done to compensate for the fact that so many students are unable to visit campuses. One of the schools that has a great story, and I hope is here with us today, is Baylor University. They've had a ton of success with the way they have adapted their campus visit program. Actually, at the end of May 2020, they started doing private visits for families that came to campus, all masked, all social distanced, all outside. They've done over 3,000 private visits since then. And it's funny, our clients there, I know you're listening, they are the biggest data nerds. That's, I think, why we get along with them so well. And I literally cannot wait to see the data that they are going to run in a few months that shows yield rates for private versus group visits. Right? It's going to be fascinating to see the difference between a private and personalized, customized campus tour and a group tour, right? Now, we're talking about in person, so I want to mention that no admissions counselors were harmed while employing this strategy. Only one Baylor staff member contracted the virus, and it was actually determined that that person was not exposed at work. So just in case you had any questions about that. But one of the other things that Baylor did really, really successfully, just to give you some examples, is they shifted, like many of you did, their large scale events like open houses online. But what they say really worked is that they also tightened them all up, right? Instead of having a professor at an in-person or a dean or not to pick on academics, to have anyone on your campus, instead of droning on for an hour about an academic program or scholarships or anything like that, they do these tight 15-minute sessions. And if it's about an academic program, it's not what courses you're going to take and all that boring stuff. It's why should you come to Baylor for this major, right? Baylor had more students attend these virtual open houses than ever attended them in person, right? So the reach is growing, right? We have to look at the positive sides of this. Students like the programs because in these remote environments, because they can pick and choose what they want to do, right? They can log in for what they want to hear, they log out, they do something else, they come back when you're hitting another topic that they care about. So, when the pandemic is over, Baylor will not pop back into the all in-person event strategy, right? From now on, they will have a very robust virtual set of events and a very robust in-person visit experience. And, when I asked, of course, I wanted to know, I wanted to ask, Baylor had, results, right? And I was talking to, you never want to count your chickens before they're hatched. So they're reluctant to say anything about fall numbers, but they did admit that based on the results they're seeing, they expect this class to be very, very strong. And by the way, their fall 2020 class was a record-breaking class. So those are just some good examples of what they're doing. I mean, a good example of something that works. So here's the deal with the campus visit, right? 85% of students say it's important, but only half of those 85% have actually been able to do it, right? And 1 in 3 college-bound high school seniors have cut a school from their list because they weren't able to visit. They weren't able to get a feel for it. And we may not be compensating as well as we might with remote tools like the virtual visits. Our study actually showed this. You'll see this in the final report. Only 54% of kids had attended a virtual event like an open house or a tour. So this is an area where we can do even better. And replacing the campus visit is not a simple task. Just yesterday, another client I was talking with sort of volunteered to describe something that's not working. So sort of the opposite of the Baylor experience. Against her recommendation, her institution pre-recorded a series of sort of office and program representatives doing, PowerPoint Zoom recordings, similar to what they would have done in person. She described them as clunky, boring, and awkward. And more importantly, they were ineffective, and she has the data to prove it. So, really getting creative and thinking about the experience that students are going to have is super, super important. That's what this data is telling us. I do want to call out one other example just to give you, because it's just always so helpful to hear, what's working and what's not working. Because there are lots of institutions that are innovating in this area and seeing great results. One of them is Fordham University. I mean, they, being in New York, they had to go completely virtual for everything, right? You couldn't go to New York during, especially early in the pandemic. Malachi is going to post a link in the chat so you can see exactly what they're offering. But, like most of you, they used to do very large day-long events for admitted students. There'd be breakout sessions for a few things, but mostly the visitors were lumped together in large venues and addressed sort of unilaterally, right? And then there's the typical, college fair-like event where they can go around and learn about different student activities and sports and things like that. Now, Fordham is doing over 250 different virtual events. They will do 250 events in March and April of this year alone. And everything is segmented and customized and targeted. So they're giving students opportunities to get exactly the information that they need, no more and no less, right? So it's a very efficient strategy. And they're being super transparent about each event opportunity. A student knows if they're signing up for something that's big or small. They know if they will be on camera or not. They know if there'll be a live Q&A or not, right? And this is helping students sort of judge exactly what they want to participate in. In a typical year, Fordham would have about 20,000 in-person visitors. This year, they've had over 30,000 virtual visitors. And those virtual programs are consistently getting a rating of 9 on a 10-point scale. So there, this is the kind of, that's the kind of innovative thinking that we need to bring. We know that these visit experiences are really important, that many people will not have the opportunity to do them even when the pandemic is over. And so we need to really think creatively about the experience that we give them virtually. And our jobs just got harder because now we need to do both, right? Virtual and in person. So again, so you can get into the mindset of this cohort of students. These are, some of the additional things that they wrote when we asked them how COVID is impacting their college search. It's definitely made me doubt my ability to go to college. It's making it really hard to even think about it right now, how messed up everything is. And it kind of makes me want to change my college plans. Just important to understand, always put some of the qualitative comments with the quantitative. All right, so this third key finding was a bit of a surprise too. I mean, the general feeling from many of us, not all, and it varies by region of the country, is that, the influence of school counselors has actually been waning, right, for the last 20 years. I mean, I've heard lots of people in the Northeast, specifically say, the influence of counselors is just going down, down, down. We know that the recommended caseload for a school counselor is 250 students, but there are some studies that show that the average caseload is actually more like 450. And there are some counselors out there that are responsible for 700 students. So for that reason, many in higher ed have sort of questioned the impact of counselors on the college selection process. Especially in light of the fact that NACAC data shows that, school counselors only spend about 21% of their time on college counseling specifically, and that's before COVID. So with so many kids and so many issues to address, many have questioned the importance of counselors as a target for college and university marketing and communication. But let me show why you should be targeting counselors, because they have a very real impact on students. And now more than ever, students are really feeling the impact of the loss of that counselor time and support. So first, let me actually start with some secondary data from an outside source. We always try to pull in secondary data with our primary data to complement it. This data is from the sources that are noted here. So you've got the links and can check out those full studies. But what we see is that a quarter of counselors say they're spending less time. They're already spending 21% of their time. Now they're spending even less during COVID times. Half spent less time on career counseling. 50% are spending more time on mental health issues, which is great, right? That's where they should be spending their time. But you can see the impact that's having on the kids who are going through the college selection process. All makes complete sense given the pandemic, but it's just an indication that this crop of kids are more likely to be on their own through the process this year. So when we asked them about it, 38% of seniors said they are not getting adequate support from their counselor on their college certs. And here's where we do see a difference, depending on the mode of instruction. You can see this, percentage is even higher, 44% if the student is enrolled at a school that is doing online learning only. It's 31% for kids that are doing either in-person or hybrid. We also see a difference between students whose families have and have not been affected by COVID. So you can see the percentage of kids who are getting the support they need from counselors is 10 points higher for family who are not getting the support they need, is 10 percentage points higher if the family's financial situation has been affected by COVID. So that's a double whammy, right, for these kids. Family's financial situation has been affected and they're not getting the support that they need. So having adequate communication with a counselor is directly linked to a student feeling prepared to make a decision about college. The link between good support from a counselor and a feeling of preparedness among students is very, very clear. Look at the 31-point difference here. 88% of kids who had strong communication with their counselor feel prepared to make their college choice. That figure is 57% for kids who did not have strong communication. So, this just, it makes clear the critical role that school counselors play. I mean, the kids just are less prepared if they don't have the advice of a counselor. We know from other sources that kids are enormously impacted by their parents and their peers in the college selection process, but the school counselor, this shows, is as relevant as ever today, right? And bringing that back to our world, it means that we need strong communications programs to communicate our value to them so that they can support students as effectively as possible. Now we're piling on a bit here, but we can see that again, that poor communication with the counselor makes a lot of things more difficult. In particular, if a student doesn't have good support from a counselor, they are more likely to say that they were challenged to determine the right major for them, identify schools that are a good fit, find scholarship information, and just even understand the steps in the admissions process. You can see all of these figures on the left here are higher than the ones on the right. All of this contributes to a higher level of anxiety. 56% of kids with weak counselor contact have a high level of anxiety compared to 44% of kids with strong counselor support. So strong support leads to lower anxiety. So here are a few more open-ended comments to show the sentiment behind all of these data points. But before we actually, wrap all this up and sort of summarize everything, there are two additional things that I want to share with you. The first one is that the COVID has definitely increased interest in public colleges and universities more than private ones. 41% of students say that they are more interested in public institutions than they were pre-COVID. Only 23% say they're more interested in private ones. That's 41 compared to 23. So the COVID is sort of working for the publics more than it is for the privates. Second, and we've heard this reported from other sources, is that the COVID drove interest in attending colleges closer to home, more than it drove interest in going further away. You know, you might argue all these kids have been stuck with their parents. They want to get the heck out of Dodge, right? And get far away from home. Not true. More of them want to stay closer to home. It was 49%, almost half of seniors that say that they are more interested in colleges and universities closer to their home than they were pre-COVID. Only 27% say they're interested in schools further away from home. So it's really double, right? 27 to 49 almost. So if you're a public institution and you're recruiting students in your backyard, you know, great. This is a good situation for you. If you're a private institution recruiting students far away from campus, this environment is not helping your efforts. So, okay, key findings. The past year has been, how do I do this? Oh, there we go. High school seniors are in support. These, deciding where to go to college is really the first major decision in these students' lives. And, they're simultaneously dealing with varying levels of anxiety, trauma, and grief. I actually worry that because these students are ill-equipped to determine which institution is a good fit for them, that we may see higher rates of attrition after the first semester and first year of enrollment of this particular class. I mean, institutions that are able to do a really strong job of orienting this fall's freshman class, they may be able to mitigate some of this. But those who just continue with the normal programming and treat these kids like every other class may have real problems with retention in the next couple years. So questions you want to be asking at your institution are, how are we prepared? I know you're asking these already. How are we prepared to address the mental health challenges of this particular incoming class? And is the entire campus taking ownership? Have individual departments and units around campus assess their own strategies and processes and deadlines in the wake of the realities that these kids are facing? How can you improve flexibility and understanding while keeping the trains running on time, right? And are we doing what we can to head off a potential escalation of attrition among this freshman class? Those are really important questions to be asking on your campus. So again, we've got this timeline issue, right? College students are behind. This class was completely denied the traditional milestones that mark the passage from high school to college, right? From adolescence to adulthood, from homecoming to prom to college fairs, campus visits, even sitting for the SAT and ACT, not to mention high school graduations, right? Which, 2 of my kids missed. This was a year where time seemed to stand still, everything blended together. So those landmark events sort of came and went. And so did the college applications deadlines, right? There was little to no structure, few markers. So many students were left lost and confused and, trying to make decisions about their future in this time that's totally marked by uncertainty and ambiguity. 41%, this is just a stat I want to remind you of, 41% of high school seniors planning to attend college in the fall had not applied to any colleges as of late February. That's just a startling number. We've been reading about how the highly selective institutions have seen an influx of applications. We know that's in part, or maybe in large part, due to the relaxed standardized testing requirements. Most schools are test optional, but that is not what the rest of the industry is experiencing. It's been reported that nearly half of all students are missing application deadlines. And those that are applying to more colleges than normal. So yield is going to be like all over the place this year. I know that your models have just been completely busted. So again, the kinds of questions that we need to be asking are, are we creating new and more effective tactics to help students determine if your institution is the right fit for them? Because you only want the right students, right? You don't want to enroll students who aren't going to be a good fit for your institution, then they're just going to leave, and that creates a whole different set of challenges. We need to be asking if we are actually effectively compensating for the fact that prospects can't or won't visit campus. We need to think about whether or not we have revised our comms flow to accommodate students who are behind compared to normal years. And then, we need to ask ourselves if we are adjusting our seasons, search, yield, melt, to address the lag that we're seeing this year. And then finally, as we discussed, school counselors, right? They were forced to shift their focus during the pandemic from providing guidance on the college choice to just helping students transition to remote learning, and in some cases, just making sure they were getting fed and had a roof over their head. So, without this pivotal resource to assist in the complicated process of applying to colleges, students are just left on their own to figure it out. So they've lost that objective third-party advocate to support them through their college search. The admissions process before COVID, we've been researching these students forever. Before COVID, it was described as stressful and annoying, and now it's gotten even worse, right? To go through the college selection process, and the reaction from a lot of kids has just been to give up. So the questions we need to be asking is, are we working within our community to, ensure that kids are getting the advising, the mentorship and support they need as they really make one of the most important decisions of their lives? How will the effect of the lack of support from counselors affect our funnel? Right? Have we evolved our marketing and enrollment media strategies, to, leverage owned, earned, and paid placements to extend support to these kids who are in need of guidance and information? And of course, how are we strengthening our relationships with these school counselors so that, they have the information that they need about you to actually support future classes? So those are the highlights. You're going to get a report that actually has more findings than that. It's even more dense. Lucky you. So, but we really hope you find this information useful and helpful. We're going to send all of you a copy of the final report as soon as the recording of this session is downloaded and is in a form that we can send it to you. We'll send you both of those things in the same email. And we hope you'll share that with your colleagues around your campus and apply it to drive your institution's success, because we assume that many of you joining us here today are working in the marketing and communications function, but these are issues that extend way beyond our areas and to many others around your campus. We will be back in touch with you about the CMO study in a few months. So please be looking out for that. And if you have questions or comments about any of this, please reach out to us directly. If you want to ask those questions or just chat, we are very easy to find on SimpsonScarborough.com, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So thank you very much for attending, everyone today. We really appreciate it. Can't wait to see you again in person, hopefully very, very soon, once we're all vaccinated. And be well and stay in touch. And thank you for joining us.